13, also known as the day before Valentine's Day, where everybody is out there going to try to make that special loved one feel extra special. And it doesn't matter whether it's a spouse or a girlfriend, boyfriend, son, a daughter, a mom, somebody, a good friend that you care for. It's just always a good time any day to say, hey, I care for you. Hey, for those that don't know who I am, what the heck is this guy doing here? This guy right here is Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers of City TV's Breakfast Television. I'm a four-time best-selling garden author. My family has two garden center businesses. I often joke that I'm a product of child labor. Spent a lot of time in the garden center growing. Of course, they're called Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery, one located in Bradford, the other in Barrie. As well, they're greenhouse growers. And I come here each and every Sunday. At least I try each and every Sunday, unless I'm doing things with my boys, to answer some of the garden questions, to be here to help you guys have a better garden journey and to grow better gardens, and even just to inspire you. Big shout out this morning, Crystal. One of the first questions that we have, it's Chris Allen saying happy Valentine's Day to you. Let's say a big shout outs too. This is your opportunity to ask some questions as well. That there's Desi and there's good old Matthew Amos. Hey, Frank. Good morning to you guys. So a couple things. If you've been following my Facebook, you've been maybe following on Twitter, you've been following on YouTube, you can see some of the things that I put out there. One of the things I put out there earlier this week, versus roses. So as we're going to buy fresh cut flowers, and we often do for Valentine's Day, I really encourage tulips over roses. And the reason being is, number one, tulips are generally locally grown. There's a ton here in Southern Ontario that are grown in the Niagara region, as well into British Columbia. There are many local greenhouse growers that grow tulips versus roses. Most of those beautiful roses that you say, and they're beautiful, are the South American roses out of Ecuador and some out of Colombia. So I like to support a local farmer. I do love roses as well. I'm not a fan of red roses. I'm more of a fan of white roses, but I would really encourage you to buy tulips over roses. So a couple things is I did some tips there, and probably one of the most common tips that people would always say is when you cut your roses, a lot of people didn't know they actually still grow in the vase, but when you cut your tulips, for me, they still grow in the vase. Tulips will always grow in the vase. But with tulips, a lot of times people have said, put pennies in the water. Well, if the pennies are copper, that works. That actually helps make those tulips last. But if they're the newer pennies, and even now we don't even have pennies, those pennies won't do any difference whatsoever. It's really just important to use cold water or a cooler water, a nice clean vase, a fresh cut on the tulip itself, and then you're going to recut your tulips a few days later, and then change that water over fresh water. With roses, just to make your roses last, and never allow leaves, either with roses or tulips, to sit in water, because if you allow that to happen, they won't last as long because you'll get bacteria that develops in the vase itself. With roses, you want to put them in warm water. That'll make them stand up. So there's a little bit about some of the roses that are out there. So we have Anne who's saying, there you go. Happy Sunday from Penetang. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. We also have a good morning as well from Pietro. Good morning to you this morning as well. And here's another shout out. Good morning from Oshawa from Judy as well. We have a good morning from Brampton. Here we go. Here's one of the first questions that we have this morning. When is the best time to start our seedlings? And this is a question that we were asked last week as well. And it really depends on what you're growing. And what really determines is the maturity dates for that plant. And there are faster growing plants, there are slower growing plants. So right now, let's say that you're thinking about growing some pansies this year, which is a nice biannual flower. That's a cold tolerant flower. Pansies take a little bit longer of a grow time, so you could start your pansies now. Many perennials are something that you can start right now. But most vegetables, we're really not starting those until we get into the month of March. You can, near the end of this month, starting some of the tomatoes and peppers. And then for many other vegetable type, squash type plants, we're really not starting those until late April. Things like cucumbers and things like squash themselves and even beans are very much a sow date that's much later. How do we figure out these sow dates? When you buy your seed, you're going to look at the back of the packages, and the back of the packages, or even on the front of the package sometime, will tell you when to sow. And often they'll say 6 to 8 weeks before last frost date. So the last frost date is the last time we should see frost in the area. In my area, it's usually about the 15th of May to the 20th of May. So we go to that date. Let's say we pick the 20th of May, and then we count 6 to 8 weeks back. That there will tell us when we're going to start sowing those seeds. We're going to use a seed starting mix. Another reminder when starting seeds as well, you don't need light, you need heat and moisture and humidity. They can germinate in a darker room, but as soon as they start to develop 3 leaves, at that point is when they need to have light. So either a bright room or you have some grow lights that help sustain them. So that's a little bit about that. Good morning from Oshawa. We already got that. Here we go. It's cold here in Ontario as well this morning. Good morning from Quebec. Very, very cold here today. We're waking up to temperatures in the minus 20s this morning in some areas of Ontario after we had a mild week. But don't worry, we're getting close to daylight hours are getting longer. Plants indoors are starting to grow more. Here's another little tip. So you can see here is my anthurium, my white anthurium. And I was finding that the anthurium was growing very one-sided. It was actually growing because it was always stretching towards the light. So what I've been doing over the last several weeks now is every time I go to sit down, I just turn the pot. So I've been turning the pot. And by turning the pot, I'm getting more even growth. If it was in a greenhouse, it would have more even light, so it wouldn't have to grow to one side. But if you're looking at your interior plants and they're always growing towards the window, they're growing towards the light. So just a little reminder to turn that pot every once on occasion, you'll have more even growth around. Here we go. This is another good morning. Thank you for doing this. We recently moved to PEI, Prince Edward Island. Beautiful. I did a couple of speaking events there from Ontario. This will be our first gardening season here in our new home. We are in the process of ordering troughs like garden planters. What do you put in the bottom of these containers? So if you take a look at some of the posts that I did last year on Instagram, in the bottom of the troughs, first thing, if you're buying those stock troughs, and that's what I grow in, they're basically what you would use at a farm where you would have cattle and or horses drink water out of. So I purchased them because they are galvanized. They're actually stainless steel and or galvanized, so they never rust. A beautiful raised bed. I pull the bottom drain out, and then in the bottom, I drill several holes to increase the drainage. I don't fill them full with soil because they will take a lot of soil. So in the base, one of them I did was just I got some cut wood, so some nice split logs of wood, and put that in the base. And then I filled the top third with soil that improved drainage, and then also filled some capacity. And I've even used empty grower pots, like larger grower pots, and flip them upside down and put them in the base as well, improving drainage and just taking up a little bit more capacity. The soil that I used was just a triple mix or a compost soil. And then what I do is I mix a few bags of potting soil just to lighten that mix up a bit. And then that's about it. Then each and every fall, I put a bag of cow manure on the top because you're always going to have some of that break down. And then after I clean everything up, I put a bag of manure, just open up a bag and I spread it on top. That frost and thaws of winter, work it in. And then there's some natural organic matter that's there. In the season, if you really want to grow it well, you can use a water-soluble fertilizer or like a Miracle-Gro shake and feed for vegetables as well. Here's another question that we have. My morning glories were a disaster this year, and I love them so much. Planted 2 packages of seeds and got 3 blooms. So morning glories, it was surprising that this year we didn't have a great, depending upon where you are. I even had my friend Brian that I work with at Breakfast Television complain about his morning glories as well. We had fairly hot conditions, and you'll find that during hot weather that the morning glories won't bloom as much because they get what's called, it's basically they get like a heat sensor that basically allows them, it's called heat delay, that allows them not to go into bloom. And then when the weather gets cooler, so even with my friend Brian, he noticed his blooms started to come on in mid to late September. And a lot of that can be environmental and not really anything to do with the morning glories themselves. It's the weather pattern that's causing that to happen. However, morning glories do need full sun. So if you planted them in an area that maybe some of the trees around now have filled in and maybe are shading a little bit more, or a structure was put up, just make sure they're in full sun. And then a lot of the times those seeds will drop after the blooms. You can always start with some new seeds or newer plants and see how that works out. But last year, morning glories did have a lot of heat delay. So morning glories weren't the best performing plant until later in the season. And that was all due to warm nights. See, what plants want is they want a warm day and a cool night that puts them into a rest period. But when we have a warm day and a warm night, that's when you'll see many plants get into heat delay. Other plants that get into heat delay as well are Osteospermum. Those are plants that you'll find that really bloom in the spring and then bloom again in the fall because they will put themselves So when a plant's in bloom, there's a lot of energy that goes to the bloom. So in order for that plant to survive hot, dry conditions, sometimes it won't bloom. It'll go into what's called a heat delay to protect it. So there you go. There's a little bit of some information there for you guys too. Oh, this is a long one here. We got a long question. Good morning. Thank you for doing this. That was the PEI question. So we already did that one. There we go. Gonna say good morning to Athena and Serena, and happy Valentine's Day to you guys as well. Let me tell you a little story. Do you guys know why roses have their thorns? Hey, folklore. Let's do a little folklore. So apparently Cupid, and we all know Cupid. Cupid's that beautiful little angel that would then shoot arrows to find love. Well, apparently Cupid the one time was really upset because one of the, and I forget which one of the gods was that he had a crush on, and that god was off with someone else. And so Cupid was so upset. And so Cupid shot an arrow, and that arrow landed into the rose bush. And so on a rose, the stem of a rose, the thorns on a stem of a rose is Cupid's arrow. It's the head of Cupid's arrow, because love is beautiful. That's the top of the rose. But love can also be painful. Take it from this guy. Love can be painful. Athena and Serena, there's my little story for you. So remember, when you see a rose and you see a thorn, that's Cupid's arrow. Boom. Here we go. Hey, Frankie, do you know if Amazon will be getting a restock of your Food to Grow book from Frederick? You know what? I'm waiting on the publisher. So the publisher has not put it into reprint. All my books are sold out. Great, but not so great, because I want people to get more of that knowledge. So that's why for Food to Grow, we're going to be doing a variation of Food to Grow and doing it as an online garden course. And that's something that I hope to release near to the end of March, that we'll be doing that online course. So it'll be an online course on how to grow your own food, particularly in troughs. There'll be 3 sections to that course as well. One section will be all on growing your own food. The second section, which will be eat, that'll be on some recipes that you can then do, and also harvesting and preparing food and storing food as well. And then the last part will be what's called live. And that live is your opportunity to get one-on-one garden coaching with me. So, stay tuned. We're working on that right now. And if things go well, I'll get it done. If things don't go well, maybe next season. We got to see how things go. Right now, we're on track. Good morning from Oakville this morning. Good morning to you as well. We have another good morning shout out as well from Kincardine, Ontario. Beautiful little place. Mississauga, where my good friend Sid that I work with is from. Good morning to you as well. Here we go. Jenny, I just purchased a lipstick plant. Great. I love it, but we're wondering how to take care of it. Lipstick plant has the glossy leaves. It's a fairly easy to care for plant. Would enjoy to be in a bright room, but not directly in front of a window. So a west or south facing room, but not directly in front of the window. That plant there doesn't need as much fertilizer as what you would think. Maybe once a month fertilizing from the months of March in through October. Be careful from overwatering. Number one killer of plants, all plants indoors, is overwatering. So make sure that that lipstick plant, if you're repotting it, that there's good drainage. You're using potting soil, or even if you just do what I do with this guy here, it looks like it's repotted, but it's actually a pot inside of a pot. Well, you always got to make sure, and you can see there's still a little bit of water sitting in the base of that container right there. And so before you water, always feel the soil. I can feel that this guy's moist, and then check the bottom of the pot as well to make sure that there's no standing water that's in there, because if you have standing water, it's still going to keep that plant nice and moist. Look at that. My sticky trap, boom, is right there, just to make sure to control fungus gnats. I'm just going to put that back over here and get it off my fingers. Back in, and I have no fungus gnats. I have a tip coming up in the next couple of weeks as well on fungus gnats. So if you have a question about fungus gnats, there you go. So there you go with the lipstick plant, bright room. Once a month fertilizer, use an all-purpose fertilizer. Water when dry, allow it to dry out in between watering, super key, and just test the soil beforehand. It's very much similar for many plants that are out there. Good morning, Mary, and she says shiny white chili Collingwood, from Shiny White Chili Collingwood. Love Collingwood, by the way. Like a place that I really, really, really love. Like love. Here we go. Somebody's talking about lupins, and this is a reply. That's what's great. I really want to mention this as well. So on these Facebook, these lives that I do that you're seeing now on Twitter as well as on YouTube, we really encourage, if you do see the answers in some of the comments, or you know the answers when people are commenting and you know some of those answers, to get on there and contribute to answering those questions. Because this is a garden community where we all share. And often, even I can learn from some of the comments that happen there. And you're always learning with gardening. There's no way that you can know it all. There's just too many plants, too many variations, new introductions of insects and diseases that happen each and every year, different weather patterns that happen, different soil types based upon where we live geographically. And there's always different tips and tricks that you can always learn. And that's what I love about gardening, is I love to learn. If you're green, you're growing. So here, lupins. I think lupins grow really well there. So lupins, I don't really know the context of the question before this, but lupins are a biannual plant. And what I mean by biannual plant is lupins will often flower every other year. So sometimes when you first plant lupins, you'll notice that they're not flowering for a period of time. They'll drop their seed. So even though you think that you're having lupins that are flowering every year, it's just that the plants are altering. So some of the plants blooming this year won't bloom next, but some of the plants that are not blooming this year will bloom next year. And so you're continuing getting. That's why with lupins, you generally want to do a group planting of lupins, not just a few plants that are out there, but generally lupins will do better in a group planting. Lupins make a beautiful cut flower as well. Good morning from Florida. This is from Barb. I got to tell you guys as well, I'm going to make a true confession here. So March the 4th, big day for me. Happy Sunday. March the 4th is my birthday. This year I'm turning the big 50. I just booked a trip. So I booked a trip with the boys, and I'm going to be away on the weekend of, I guess it would be March the 13th, but I may be doing a Facebook live or a live on the location where I'm traveling with my boys. I know, I feel good. I am actually fully vaxxed. And I think the time to travel is now. It's been way too long. I haven't been on like a destination vacation with my boys since I think it was 2018. So it's a while, 2018 or 2019. So there we go. So here we go with another question. I just have a new front walkway put in, okay, and we'll be putting a new garden this spring. I'm in Bradford, great town, by the way. South facing, looking for suggestions of low height and low maintenance perennial suggestions. So south facing means that you're going to be in full sun. If you're looking for something that's low height and low maintenance and perennial, you may even consider some flowering shrubs. Something that's quite beautiful is the boomerang dwarf lilacs that will continuously bloom, or even the Miss Kim flowering lilacs. They're quite nice. They're easy so they get a bloom. You can hedge them if you want to hedge them quite easy. A fragrant flower, so they bloom and they have a beautiful fragrance as well. These are shrubs, morpho flowering shrubs versus perennials. There are some dwarf varieties of hydrangeas. One variety, which is called Little Lamb's Ears, which is really quite nice. Pinky Winky is another one that's quite nice. For perennials that are exceptionally low maintenance, Echinacea, so those are the cone flowers that are really good. Then you have ground covers as well. Several different flowering ground covers that you can have, even some of the sedums and stone crops. Stone crops are the ground cover varieties, but sedums themselves, like Autumn Joy. If you're looking for a bulletproof perennial plant, but it doesn't bloom till later season, that would be Autumn Joy or Brilliant Sedum, drought tolerant, great and south facing. So those are some of the suggestions for you there as well. Good morning to Sunny Barry, where I live for a bunch of years. Stratford, big shout out to Stratford. Enjoy your topics as well. Stratford Garden Festival is one of my favorite festivals that I used to go to. And Stratford's just a lovely little community. Lovely little community. There's a beautiful cheese shop on the main street there that I loved. I have just that's the Bradford question again. Here we go. Another question that's here. Can you plant tulip bulbs in pots now? So if you have some tulip bulbs that you have, and they've been put, let's say that they were down in a cold cellar, like a cantina, a fruit cellar, or they were in a garage that was fairly insulated, and they've been in cool, dark spot, that put them in the plunge period. You can then put them in pots with potting soil and then introduce them to sunlight, moisture, and they will grow. And yes, you can. However, if they were just in a dry area that was still warm, they wouldn't have gone through the dormancy period. So they have to be somewhere that's, even if you plant them in pots, let's say that we planted them in pots and we put them down in the cantina or fruit cellar if you have that, and you put them down there for about 3 weeks and then brought them up, that would be sufficient for a plunge period for you. There are some forest bulbs that you could have bought back in the fall. They won't be available right now. And there's some of the things, but you can't really buy bulbs right now. So there are no bulbs available, but you can buy potted tulips right now as well. Here we go. So tell Dina and Sid, thanks for answering my questions live on BT. It made my day. Matthew, I'll make sure I tell them. Of course, BT is a great little show. Good morning from Wasaga Beach. Wasaga Beach is one of the largest sand dunes in Canada. Did you know that? It's pretty cool. One of the largest freshwater beaches. My family has a cottage in Woodland Beach, not far from there. I have a ZZ plant. ZZ plant, amazing. If you are looking for one of the lowest maintenance plants that are out there as an indoor plant and you're the first-time gardener, ZZ plant. I have it in a semi-dark bathroom. How much and should I water this? Also, thanks for the suggestions. The plant looks great. So we need to have some light in that room. Even though ZZ plants are easy and they will do well in low light situations, low light does not mean no light. How often do you water it? Could be once every other week, even once a month, because being in a bathroom, if there's a shower in that bathroom, that shower, every time you're having a shower, puts humidity in the room, so things won't dry out as fast. It won't be as dry of the room. If it doesn't have a lot of sunlight, it's not going to dry out. But really, it depends on the size of the container and also how good the drainage is in that pot. So that's why you always test the soil before you water. So at first, water it, and then let's wait about 7 days, and then go over, take your finger, put it in the soil. If the soil feels somewhat moist or moist at all, don't water. Wait another 2 to 3 days, test the soil again. And then that'll give you an indication of how often you're watering. So let's say like today's a beautiful sunny day here in Ontario, even though I have the blinds closed that you can't see that. But if we had 5 consecutive days of sunshine, that means that there'd be more natural light. So my plants are going to need a little bit more extra water. But let's say that I had 7 days of cloud cover. My plants are really not utilizing that much water. So your watering pattern, even though you think I could just water every week, I'm going to water every Friday. That doesn't work because different variations of sunlight happen. And so we have to always check the soil before we water or look at the plants. Often, like with my peace lily that's to my left over here, I can tell when it needs water because I'll just look to it and I can see that the leaves sometimes are drooping. But I always look at the soil before I water because sometimes if it's sitting too wet, it can also droop its leaves as well. So there you go. Here we go as well. Boom. Good morning, Frankie. I'm noticing some tips of the leaves of my houseplants are turning brown. Would this have anything to do with using tap water? Probably not from using tap water. Another tip of mine is with tap water, best thing to do is after you finish watering, fill up your watering can and just put it down. And then that way, when you go to water next, you'll have a full watering can. The benefit of that is that that watering can is going to be at room temperature, and plants really enjoy having mild water, having room temperature water. They don't like it being cold. They really don't. Next thing is by that room, that water sitting in that watering can, gotta use my brain there, in that watering can, some of the impurities or some of the different things that have been put in the water can actually evaporate out. So it's better for the water. The reason why you can have yellow tips is your watering itself. If they're sitting too wet, you'll get a yellow tip. If they're actually drying out too much in between watering, you'll get a yellow tip. Yellow tips can also be an indication if they're too close to a heating vent. So look to some of those plants because now that we had colder weather and the heat's been turned on more, look to some of those plants and make sure they're not too close to any heating vents. So yellow tips are a sign of stress. Stress can be overwater, underwater, different variation of environment. And sometimes the yellow tips are never going to be an insect. If there's chew marks or if it looks like the plant itself actually has a blistering in the leaf, that's more of an insect problem that's there. How do I get my amaryllis to bloom again? Is this question, or to bloom longer? This is from Sandy. So if we want even a potted tulip, if we want any flowering bulb, so an amaryllis is a flowering bulb, if we put it into a room that's a cooler room with less light, it's going to bloom longer. Actually, if I get an amaryllis or even a tulip and it's growing in the pot and they're just about to bloom, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I don't want that to bloom today. I can then take that pot of tulips, put it down. I have a cantina here. I can put it in my cantina, which is my fruit cellar, let it sit there, and it'll actually stay dormant because it's going to be cool and dark. So it thinks that, hey, it's still time not for me to wake up. Then I can bring it into my sunny back kitchen because my back kitchen's sunny, like so much windows, southerly facing, crazy amount of light. And then as soon as I put it within there, it'll grow very instantaneously. And within a day to 2 days, it'll probably open. And the more sun, the more heat, the faster it's going to go through its cycle. So if you get it to a cooler room and a little less sun, you can actually kind of let them go a little bit longer. So there you go. Here's a little thing from Paul Ronan. So Paul's a great friend, by the way. Paul is someone who has dedicated so many hours of service towards Parks and Rec, but also as well as to Landscape Ontario, to forestry. Great guy. We love our municipal gardens, and we do. We love all of our municipal gardens, and they're such, let me just say that New York City. So New York City, there was a period of time in New York City where they had a high crime rate. And you know what New York City did to kind of clean up some of that crime rate was they actually started working on their parks. And by cleaning up the parks and by really putting more time and energy into the parks, all of a sudden people were like, I got to take care of the parks. If you don't take care of the parks, then that's when you'll get vandalism. That's when you'll have people throwing garbage. But if we take care of our parks and we really put more attention to them, and we found this during the pandemic, that they give so much back to us, they're so important for a community, and they're really a reflection on the health and vibrancy of that community. So municipal parks, I agree so much. Okay, good morning from Tobermory. I've really not spent too much time in Tobermory, but that's kind of, so as I'm turning 50, I want to do like 50 things in my last 50 years. I always want to, and I'm wanting to do 50 things a year. And a lot of that's going to be adventure, going to try new things and see new places and things like that. Good morning, good -24. This is from Leslie from Muskoka. Can I start dahlias inside? If you have space, you can start the dahlias inside. Just a reminder that sometimes what happens if we start them a little bit early, which right now is a little bit earlier, I would wait to the beginning of March, because sometimes they'll stretch. And because you don't have a lot of sun, let's say that you don't have a really good, if you have lots of light, then they'll be more even. And if you can actually if your home is one that stays a little bit cooler at night, they'll actually be a little bit slower growth. But if you don't have a lot of light and your house is always constantly warm, then you're going to get a lot of stretch, soft growth. And then that's not good growth for that plant when we go to put it outside in spring. So there you go with that. What do we got for time? 27 minutes. Okay. Here we go. Another question here as well. I have great luck by placing my houseplants in containers of watering and letting them drink from the bottom. That's a great way. It's a great way. They only take as much as they need, so they're never overwatered. Here's another tip for you too. Let's say that we take this plant, and instead of just let's say I take this plant to the sink and it's in this grower pot. So that green pot, that's what's known. This is what's called the grower pot. So if I take this to the sink, I fill the sink up with water, and then if the pot's dry, and then I just put this into the water, and I hold my hands on either side so the soil doesn't pop out, so it doesn't pop out of the pot. I put it into the water. As soon as I don't see any more bubbles, that's when it's watered. Then I can put it into the pot, and it's nice, evenly watered. And that is the perfect way to water a plant. The reason, and even when you put it in the bottom and it will wick itself up, that's what's called wicking. The reason why that's perfect is really by keeping water off the foliage, we reduce the amount of disease. And by keeping it to the root zone and doing that kind of deep watering, but then allowing it to dry out, that is where plants are going to be most happy. So good tip, totally. Here we go. Here's another one. Matthew, are you going to watch the Super Bowl today? Matthew's always asking these questions. Matthew shares so much, and I love that. Indeed, I'm going to watch to about halftime because it goes too late. Who am I cheering for? I'm not a huge football fan, so I have no knowledge, like none. But I have been watching leading up. It was pretty exciting. So Cincinnati was pretty exciting, but for some reason I do want LA Rams. That's who I'm cheering for. That's there. Okay. Good morning as well. This is good morning from Perry Sound, a balmy -34 here this morning. That's cold. How do I keep my tomato seedlings from going spindly? Great question. It all goes down to how you're growing them. So a reminder is that by restricting water on tomatoes, we can actually thicken up the stem. So don't overwater, because that's when you're going to get weak growth. Having them in your room, which is a little bit cooler at night, will slow them down in growth as well. Even light is also very important too. So those are the three things. Controlling your watering is really important. So not make them too wet because you'll get stretched growth. A cooler nighttime, really important. And even like rooms that are like 80 degrees. So let's say your room is sitting at about 22 to 23 degrees. That's great for growth, but at night we would want that to be almost a little bit cooler, like 5 degrees cooler. You can save a lot of money on heat that way too, and it's better for your plants. That's some ways. But allowing that tomato plant to dry out in between waterings, watering and temperature are the two ways that we can control growth, and as well as light. If they're becoming really spindly, sometimes they're stretching to the light, and it's usually fast growth. We want to slow that growth down. Here we go with another one. Good morning. I brought in my strawberry plants inside over winter in a terracotta pots. What kind of care should I provide them over winter? So strawberry plants need to go through a period of dormancy. So they need to go through a rest period. So there's at some point where you got to take that strawberry plant and you got to put it, if you have an insulated garage that doesn't freeze but does get cool, that's a good thing. If, like I said, if you have a fruit cellar or a cantina, you put it in that space for about 3 weeks to a month. Forgive me. That's the plunge period. Still getting, like, I had COVID there a few weeks ago. Still a little bit flummy that's there. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question. Actually, we're going to give a couple shout outs here too. Sharon Lloyd, good morning. Happy pre-Valentine's Day to all as well. And we're going to finish off with this one from Joy. Best way to fight slugs in a raised garden bed. So slugs are crawling insects. And because slugs are crawling insects in that raised bed, what we can do is we can take, even if you love shellfish, like you love eating mussels or clams or things like that, after you're done eating them, save those shells, let them dry out, and then you're going to crunch them up. So you can put them into a bag or something, and you're going to basically pulverize them. And then you're going to put the base of all that raised bed, you're going to put some of those crushed shells. That'll actually cut back on slugs. Watering in the morning versus night will cut back on slugs as well. Slugs will never walk across copper. So on a raised bed, even if you got and you can purchase a copper tape, on the edge of that bed along the outside, you can put a copper tape around. Slugs won't walk across it. So there's that way that you can do that too. And then there's also a slug control that you can use as well. So the Slug Be Gone is something that's really good and also safe for you to use. So those are some of the tips. So for all those, what was your favorite tomato to grow last year? This is from Genevieve. Cherokee Purple tomato, the best heirloom variety tomato, Cherokee Purple tomato. Still craving about it. I was talking about it the other day. So for all those that joined me this morning on this pre-Valentine's Day, on the Super Bowl Sunday, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'm here each and every Sunday to help you with any of your garden questions. You can always reach out to me. FrankieFlowers.com is my website. Frankie@FrankieFlowers.com is my email address. You'll see me tomorrow morning on Breakfast Television, Monday through Friday, where I'm wild about weather, passionate about plants, and always here to help you. And a reminder, gardening is way better than therapy. And the reason being, in the end, you get tomatoes. And who doesn't love some tomatoes? I do. Cherokee Purple tomatoes, the best. Love it.